networking is an art and it takes time. It can feel daunting, but everybody there are there for the same purpose, to network and to meet new people. So often the best trick is go and introduce yourself and then ask questions and listen, because people out there want to share their story, want to talk about themselves often. So it's actually a good way then that helps you to ease your nerves. And as you go to the next person, you learn more. And also you're giving the opportunity to the other person to share about their lives, their stories, their business, their experience. And that's a way you can interact with them.
こんにちは皆さん。Business Success Japan のポッドキャストへようこそ。Hello everyone and welcome to the Business Success Japan podcast. This is your host, Ludi Bukomen. This podcast is made for those who want to develop or strengthen the communication skills, cultural savvy, insights into current trends and conditions, and mindsets that are essential in a Japanese business environment. The helpful practical suggestions and engaging insights offered here provide listeners with the in-depth cultural context needed to achieve their own version of success while collaborating with Japanese counterparts. In today's episode, I get to share a conversation that I had with Robert Heldt. After a career in hospitality and advertising, Robert co-founded Custom Media, an award-winning integrated digital marketing and strategic communications agency in Tokyo in 2008. He regularly advises global brands on their market entry and expansion strategies for Japan. Robert has launched several successful media and content platforms, the most recent being Go Connect, an award-winning digital marketing platform that features interesting content and great offers and experiences for foreigners living in or visiting Japan. He also judges at the annual Japan Market Expansion Competition and is a deputy chair of Animal Refuge Kansai. Be sure to check out his links in the description of this episode to learn more.
Thank you, Lydia. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm really excited to have this chat with you. My name is Robert Heldt. I'm from Chennai, which is in the southeast coast of India. And so while doing university, I took an apprentice job in the hospitality sector in the front office. And while I was working on that job, I got an opportunity to go and work in a resort hotel in the Maldives. And so I started an entry-level position there in front office, and later, grew in the role into a management position in as an accommodations and guest relations officer. It was a fantastic job, taking care of guests from arrival to departure, including VIPs. And I organized events, excursions, private events, private parties, liaised with travel agencies and tour guides, and made sure that they had a good, memorable holiday with us. And I got to meet with remarkable people from all over the world, work with remarkable people. And, I was very fortunate to meet my future wife over there. We got married in India, and then I moved to Japan in 2004.
So did you move to Japan because your wife was Japanese, or what brought you to Japan?
That's right, yes. So I moved to start a family in Japan.
And what area of Japan did you end up coming to?
So we moved to Tokyo, to Tachikawa initially. That's where we started. But for me, coming to Japan, I was quite fascinated by the advertising scene over here. Everywhere I went, there was this bold, creative, sometimes boring adverts, that kind of drew my attention. And I was really fascinated with this industry. So I wanted to get started into it and look for opportunities in advertising and media. So I found a job doing advertising sales for an English publisher, selling advertising space for the American Chamber of Commerce in Japan's membership magazine. I did that for about 3 years, and then saw an opportunity for bilingual media and marketing. And so I decided to start Custom Media in 2008. I've always wanted to start my own business. At the time, there weren't many smaller kind of boutique publishing companies or marketing firms that were doing bilingual content. Of course, the bigger players had bigger teams and could, put together bilingual content. And this is before digital marketing, as we now know it, expanded. There wasn't Facebook or Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. They weren't the marketing channels in Japan at the time. So, for me, I wanted to kind of grow in bilingual marketing and media. And so over the last 15 years, grew the business and expanded it beyond magazine publishing to become a fully bilingual integrated agency. And that's kind of where the business is today. And then in 2020, when COVID hit, most of the small businesses were struggling, especially those in the travel hospitality sector. And typically in any downturn economy or crisis, along with layoffs or freezing of hiring, the first thing that most businesses cut in terms of budget is marketing spend, right? But strategically, that is when businesses should be promoting themselves because you need more customers to stay in business, right? So smaller businesses could not afford that. As much as they wanted to, they could not, right? So we launched GoConnect, which is a digital marketplace platform to support these small businesses by providing them free advertising and marketing and trying to get them to reach newer customer audiences to stay in business. And then over the last 2 years, with offering the service, we've seen demand for this from smaller businesses and many of our members on the platform. So we decided to expand and invest in it and make it a fully automated marketplace.
Great. So what sorts of industries does your company end up supporting on that platform in terms of small businesses, or is it all industries?
It's mostly B2C, anything that's direct to consumer. So hospitality, food and beverage, leisure, entertainment are the top sectors. But we also have B2B in terms of training, or legal services. Those are the other kind of businesses. And we also support charities and nonprofits.
Great. So going back to what you were saying about founding a bilingual media company, it just seems kind of late in the game for there to have not been a bilingual media company in the same way that your company functions. Do you have any idea why that might be, or were there any barriers involved in that?
I mean, the bigger players were definitely, in the market providing bilingual marketing. I think bilingual marketing, resources are the key challenge. You need fully bilingual, staff, especially in terms of editorial and content that understands, cultural nuances. So often, what we get is companies putting out websites that are just translated, not transcreated. So they lose the nuance to and appeal to the Japanese consumer, like to understand the Japanese consumer mindset. So it takes more time and it takes a lot of resources. So putting together a team that can deliver that in-house can be, quite challenging. So smaller companies, prefer to stay in a niche and then focus on certain sectors or certain industries. And if there's no need for it to be bilingual, it does help to keep your costs down, keep your resources limited.
So then just based on what you're seeing being in the trenches with everything that's going on right now, it seems like a time that people are either very excited or very nervous or both in a lot of cases. But what, from your perspective, do you see happening with the upcoming tourism boom that will likely happen this year?
Oh, I think it's an exciting time. I think, when Japan reopened its borders to individual tourists last year, visitor numbers just jumped, right? I think in November, Japan recorded almost 1 million tourists, to Japan. At the same time, October last year, the companies in the sector also benefited from, Japan's national travel discount program. It was a government-funded program to subsidize trips within Japan. So that also helped to boost tourism. I believe that this year will be a growth year for the travel sector, both domestic, inbound, outbound as well. Pre-pandemic in 2019, almost 32 million tourists visited Japan, right? And if you're looking at just November's numbers, I think it's a good indicator that where, Japan is, and Japan is still a popular destination. And as a matter of fact, I think Japan was the second most Googled post-quarantine vacation destination in the world, so after Australia. So that shows that, there's still interest in Japan. And, also during the pandemic, prefectures and regions, they received large government grants called Ojokin to promote their local destinations, especially to inbound tourists. So this will also further boost, Japan's appeal. So they're investing a lot in promoting, the various regions of Japan to international travelers. I think all of this is going to have a positive effect on Japan. Not to mention, the Japanese yen has been pretty weak, although we're starting to see a little, bounce back. So yeah, I think all of that will combine, and be an attractive year in terms of tourism for Japan.
Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting to see how things start working out this year. But in your perspective, is there any amount of rebuilding that needs to happen in order to meet this pent up demand to travel in Japan? Because having the borders closed for 2 years, I'm sure that a lot of businesses that were geared towards tourism went out of business or weren't able to stay open during the past 2 years. So, do you think there's going to be some challenges with just meeting the needs of tourists in this coming 2, 3 years?
I think the challenge is, and this is for the hospitality sector, not just in Japan, globally, has been resources, right? Because many people working in the industry got laid off, and you need to move on with their lives, and had taken other jobs or switched industries or learned to go freelance and be individual. So attracting talented staff in the hospitality sector, which is it's a pretty high service sector. They are well trained. So when you lose that talent, it's difficult to find replacement talent, or it takes time to attract talent and train them and get them back, get them on the workforce. So I think that's, and I'm seeing that already in Tokyo with certain restaurants. Even these are 5-star hotels that are struggling with service because they don't have the staff, or they had to shut down their restaurant, even though they can operate financially. I think that's going to be the biggest challenge, people. And the same with the airline industry and hotels and anything in hospitality and tourism. Finding talented staff, often bilingual staff. If they're servicing international tourists, is the key. That's a challenge that once the sector can overcome, I think that should be good.
Yeah, I'm sure that this is a hard question, but do you have any idea how they might be able to find that bilingual talent? Because just looking at the statistics of bilingualism in Japan itself, it seems like it's a little bit hard to source that sort of talent.
I know, and that's a struggle we have in our own business. Most of our team members are fully bilingual and need to be in order to service our clients and understand, not only language but also culture. So our team members, especially our Japanese team members, have lived abroad, studied abroad, and understand, have a global mindset and can relate to that when dealing with international business minded people, right? It is a tough question. Yeah, I think it just depends on how much the businesses are willing to invest in training the team, and what's the point where they're going to say, okay, it doesn't need to be perfectly bilingual, but certain level of language skills are going to be enough for this role, and then you can train for the missing elements. I think that's kind of what companies will need to do.
So, do you have any recommendations for people who may be hoping to come to Japan for travel or possibly get a little bit of sightseeing in when they come over for a business trip? Do you have any recommendations for finding great experiences without preferably breaking the bank while they're here?
Sure. I mean, Japan's amazing. It has a lot to offer tourists, right? There are amazing experiences that are either free or less expensive, and it really depends on the destination that you're visiting. But if you take Tokyo, for example, Tokyo is a beautiful city. If you want to take in a full panoramic view of the city, you immediately think of an observation deck. You've got Roppongi Hill, Sky Tree, Tokyo Tower. They're all reasonably priced, to go in and get a good experience of Tokyo. But then you've got the Tokyo Metropolitan Government Building in Shinjuku. How many people know this? The observation deck there is free and open to the public. So, you can get the same experience from, Skytree as you would probably get from the Tokyo Government Building, good view of Mount Fuji and also the other towers, right? And there are many parks in Tokyo and all around the country that one can visit. That's free. Imperial Palace has beautiful gardens. It's very scenic. The Hamariki Garden in Shimbashi, which kind of dates back to the Edo period, that has a free English guided tours during the week. And just thinking about not spending money at all. Many things you can do. Shibuya Crossing is an experience in and of itself. And not far from there, you've got Harajuku, which is the trendy spot for youth culture, and its shopping district, the Takeshita Dori, right? But then, if possible, I'd also recommend, participating in local matsuris. That's a good way for one to immerse themselves in traditional culture. The list goes on. There's just really a lot, one can find Japan has to offer. So I would recommend doing a little bit of research, seeing, especially if you're looking for a cultural experience, which is, what many people come to Japan for. It's amazing experience. Do a little bit of research and you can find a lot of things to do.
Yeah, definitely. And just for context, Matsuri is festivals, and especially in summertime, there's quite a few. A lot of them will have fireworks. So every place kind of has their own Matsuris going on at different times. But how do you recommend people go about finding information about these events, about these free ideas, free or inexpensive ideas for traveling in Japan? Because there's obviously a lot of information on the internet, but one, some of it may be out of date, especially given everything that's happened in the last couple of years. And two, it's just hard to know what's trustworthy on the internet in the first place.
Sure. Yes, there's lots of information on the internet, but I find that there are many international and domestic media sites that maintain updated information, and these are global media sites like Tokyo Timeout, Tokyo Chipo, and the domestic ones like Tokyo Weekender or Savvy Tokyo. Right. For our part, what we are doing is we're working hard to make it really easy for foreigners by curating lists of English-friendly resources and seasonal experiences on our platform, both for tourists and also for foreigners living here. I think those who move to live in Japan also want to take in Japan, experience it, at their own pace, and they don't have the time constraints as tourists have. So they can enjoy experiencing Japan during their stay, whether it's 1 year, 2 years, or 5 year period, right? So our Go Connect platform, we have a weekly newsletter that goes out to all our members. And by the way, membership on our platform is completely free. So members can sign up and receive the newsletter, which has original articles, curated lists of English-friendly resources, but also discounted experiences, products, services, and much more. And what's unique about Go Connect versus other media that are out there is we combine content with useful experiences and offers. So members can get the information, but also get to leverage the special discounts that we offer to enjoy their stay. Our goal is pretty simple. We want to provide interesting content and exciting offers that enrich the lives of our members, whether they are residents or tourists visiting Japan. So give something, we have something in it for everybody. That way they can get the information, but also get to experience it and also get a good discount on the product or service or travel offering.
Great. And I'll be sure to put a link to the website in the description of this episode, so be sure to check that out later. But I was just wondering if most of the content there is geared more towards the Tokyo area or the Tokyo, Kyoto, Nara, Osaka area. That's kind of the main parts of Japan that most tourists end up in, or does it also cover information in more rural or specialized or obscure areas in Japan?
We're starting off, of course, with the key cities and then expanding out, throughout Japan. Yeah, so that's the goal for us, to provide information throughout how to enjoy your stay throughout Japan.
So, do you have any idea what people might be able to do to find information in those more specific areas of Japan? Would you recommend they try to figure out how to get in contact with different tourism boards in the areas that they want to go to, or anything else?
Yeah, I would suggest the local tourism boards, the prefectural websites, and the local tourism boards. Definitely, as I said earlier, they have good budgets, marketing budgets, so they're investing in providing information. In fact, we worked with the Tokyo Convention and Tourism Bureau, and providing content about trips around Japan, not just Tokyo for that matter. So yes, and during the Rugby World Cup, we helped to promote sports tourism. So we helped to produce a website called Japan Sports Journey that has a lot of information about sports tourism and enjoying Japan during the Rugby World Cup and beyond. So tourism bodies and local governments are investing in promoting their areas. So definitely check that out. Again, those will be authentic sources. Those projects take time, to go up, and it's done thoroughly. So those projects, take 6 months to a year to get everything right. It's all about perfection and accurate information. So definitely trustworthy sources to go and check out.
Do you know if there's a centralized web page that lists different birds, or is that something that people will just have to try to figure out how to do a Google search for? Because for some people, just the act of searching, especially if they don't know Japanese, can be a little bit of a challenge.
Well, Japan National Tourist Organization, JNTO, that would be the one to start with. And from there on out, they do have other websites, and it's also a global site with multiple languages.
So, are there any other English-friendly resources that might be available to people while they're in Japan, whether it's related to just the day-to-day getting around, maybe if they have safety concerns or anything like that?
uh, often it's the embassy websites. The embassies have very thorough guides on what to do, what not to do when visiting Japan, how to get assistance, and contact emergency contact numbers, that very practical information, because again, tourists would have a language barrier. So their, embassy website would be the first place to go.
So, would you mind telling us a little bit more about your experience or knowledge of the international community that you've been exposed to in Japan?
Yeah, absolutely. The international community in Japan is quite active, especially in Tokyo. Throughout my career, I've been very fortunate to meet, interact, and learn from mentors, senior business leaders, who are part of these international communities. They're usually very gracious with their time, with their knowledge and expertise, and helps put me in the right direction and help mentor me to get started. And there are several ways to get involved and be active in the international community. Most countries, they have an international chamber of commerce that facilitates trade and business between the home country and Japan. And you don't need to be a citizen of that country to become a member of these chambers of commerce. That's sometimes kind of confusing. People think, well, do I need to be American to join the American Chamber of Commerce? Not necessarily. There are, of course, application guidelines and criteria. If you meet that, you can become a member. In the most prominent and active chambers in Tokyo, are the American Chamber, the British, Canadian, Australia, New Zealand, South African, Brazilian, and there are several European chambers of commerce and also, European Council for Business. So these are kind of business organizations that you can become a member and kind of get involved in the community. Then there are also membership clubs and societies. For example, the Tokyo American Club, the Yokohama Country and Athletic Club, the Kobe Country Club, the Foreign Correspondence Club of Japan. There's the America-Japan Society, Japan-British Society, Australia Society. The list goes on. All these organizations, they have, regular educational, business, or social events. And, if any of your listeners are interested, I would recommend they first look for their home country Chamber of Commerce, or their home country society and join them, become a member there and get active in that community. And finally, there are many worthy nonprofit organizations set up and run by foreigners and the international community, tackling societal issues, from refugees and children with cancer to abused and unwanted children and animals. The causes are many. Just to name a few organizations, Refugee Empowerment International, Shine On Kids, Mirai no Mori, Yui Me, Yamaton, Knights in White Lycra, and all these NPOs and more of them are actually listed on our Go Connect platform. including ways you can volunteer and get involved in these nonprofits. And for our part, my agency, Custom Media, and my team, we support the organizations that I just mentioned. We offer them branding and marketing and PR services. And personally, I'm involved with Animal Refuge Kansai. I'm the deputy chair of this organization. It's an NPO that was established in 1999 that's dedicated to rescue unwanted, abused, and homeless animals. Our aim is to help rehabilitate them and then to find them permanent, loving homes. So if you're moving to Japan, you love animals, you want a pet, do not buy. Please adopt. Find an adoption agency. Go to ARC. And you will find. You can find. You can support their cause, but also limit this ongoing trade of animals in Japan, which is pretty sad.
I know that we weren't planning on having this conversation, but do you have anything more to say about the topic of animal rights in Japan and how the conditions are for animals in Japan?
I wouldn't deviate the topic conversation, but I just feel in Japan, there are more pets than children, and that's it's a big industry. So many in there, which causes hoarding. So many people buy a lot of pets and start to hoard them, and then start to mistreat them and don't have the resources to take care of them. So often, our organization ARC is called in to help rescue dozens of pets that someone has started hoarding and don't know how to care for them. So then we need to go and rescue them and then find ways to rehabilitate them and then find them good homes. But yeah, I think it's an issue that, and that's not just the case, but in case of a disaster, when the earthquake struck in March 11, and then the Kobe earthquake, before that, many animals went homeless, and ARC then helped rescue those animals and rehabilitate them and find them new homes.
I'm glad to hear that your organization is putting in such good work on that. And also just that there are so many organizations that foreigners can get involved in, whatever they're most interested in or passionate about. But just going back to the Chamber of Commerce, what does membership to the Chamber of Commerce offer to individuals? Because I think the idea is that, oh, I don't have a business and I'm not a part of some big conglomerate. So why would I participate in the Chamber of Commerce? Would you mind telling us a little bit more about what that looks like?
Sure, it really depends from chamber to chamber, what's their mission and their objectives. But in general, as a business person joining any chamber of commerce, you can, you know, participate in their educational events. You can learn. You can network with like-minded people. You can build your career out of that. I hear so many success stories of people finding jobs from people they meet, at these events. Also, if you're planning to start a business, when I did, I didn't have a clue where to get started. But through networking and interacting with members of these organizations, I started to learn about what is it to do business in Japan, started to build my own contacts of when I wanted to start. And so when the time was right, I did have that network, I did have the knowledge, I did have the support, I did have the mentors to guide me. So it really depends on each individual, but definitely business and career. Even if you don't have a business, yourself, or you work for a company that doesn't necessarily see the benefit of becoming a member of any chamber individually. And again, most chambers offer reasonable prices for individual memberships. So usually corporate members are the ones that pay more and fund the organization's activities, but individual membership fees are usually very reasonable. Pick a chamber, it's an annual fee, and then you participate in their events. And often they also do joint chamber events that are also interesting. So then you can expand your reach beyond the chamber that you are a member of, and and learn and grow.
Do you have any advice for people who might still feel a little bit allergic to networking as a concept? I have to say, I was one of those people not too long ago, so I completely understand the feeling. But what would you say to somebody who might feel anxious at the idea of signing up to an organization, for the purpose of going and meeting people and networking with them?
Well, networking is an art, and it takes time. If you don't have the experience, or you initially worried about networking, and it can feel daunting, but you know everybody there are there for the same purpose, to network and to meet new people. So often, the best trick I would suggest is go and introduce yourself. Say, hey, I'm so and so, I'm Robert Hall from Custom Media, and then ask questions and listen. Because people out there, want to share their story, want to talk about themselves often. So it's actually a good way then that helps you to ease your nerves. And as you go to the next person, you will learn more. And also you're giving the opportunity to the other person to share, about their lives, their stories, their business, their experience. And that's a way you can interact with them. And I think once you've done one or two events, you'll quickly become pro at it. And also then you can form friend circles there. So you're often like, okay, I'm going to the next one. Will you be there? So you start to attend events with like-minded business people, and like-minded friends that you've made through these events. And then you start to gain more success and more confidence in going out there and networking. And of course, networking events, there are a lot of people with sales backgrounds that have come there to build their contact list for sales opportunities. So they're very proactive. Often they would also introduce you. So I'm often introducing others to, have you met so and so, and keeping the conversation moving so that you can move on and meet other people. So those would be little tricks I would recommend.
Yeah. Yeah. The only way to get better is to actually go and do it. So.
Yes. Yeah. The first time, and then build the confidence with time. Yeah.
And I can back up the idea that asking questions is the best way to really make connections with people, because most people just really enjoy talking about themselves. So it never hurts to start there. So, is there anything else that people should know about the international community in Japan? In your experience, do those organizations tend to be a little bit more integrated between non-Japanese and Japanese people, or do they tend to be mostly non-Japanese?
They tend to be mostly non-Japanese, but then there are, many Japanese business leaders that are, working for multinational corporations in Japan, who are also members. You'd find they're mostly mid or senior level Japanese executives who are fully bilingual. So I would say it is a good mix, and often there is, if you're looking at a specific chamber, there is a common goal, a common shared interest. Either your business is from that country, or you do business with companies from that country, or there is a shared purpose.
In your experience, do you think that it is important for people to make an effort to connect with the Japanese population? Because especially if somebody doesn't have those Japanese language skills, it can be a little bit harder to naturally find those situations to meet Japanese people and connect and network with them. Do you have any idea what people can do if they want to be more intentional about making those connections?
I think the societies are the way to go, because often Japan British Society, or Australia Society, or America Japan Society, they're mostly run by Japanese who have lived in the US or Europe or UK or Australia, New Zealand, and so they want to stay connected culturally to that people from that country, and so they're very active in those organizations. And often you'd find, when you start conversations with them, they know more about your country than you do. Just like you know more about when living in Japan than and most Japanese do sometimes, right? So they're excited to share their life stories and what they did, where they worked, and places they visited while they were in the UK or America, and those are really nice ways. And often they would be open to introducing you to other Japanese that share the same experiences. So that's one way for you to really kind of interact with the Japanese population in business and in society. And again, they are fully bilingual, so language shouldn't be a barrier.
And I can see how that would be such an important asset for you as you were building your business. And you mentioned the challenge of finding bilingual staff for your company, but were there any other challenges that you faced starting your company in Japan?
Well, when I started 2008, the financial crisis hit. So, the challenge for me at the time was having the resources to go and pitch our company, our services to come, to big Japanese companies, right? And I think for me, the challenge at the time was credibility, and we were one person, two-person startup without full time staff. So building the relationship and having the credibility to present your organization to pitch for bigger work, bigger clients, and bigger projects. So that was the biggest challenge at the time. And, the way we tackled it was, trying to get initial small projects that we can deliver and give us an opportunity to showcase what we do. Based on that, then we built a good portfolio of clients that we work with and gain credibility. And then based on that, we could get more projects and more clients.
So, do you have any specific hopes for your company looking forward? Are there any areas that you're hoping to move into or develop more?
Yeah, so with custom media, we have two sides of the business. We have our owned media and advertising side of the business, and then we have our marketing agency, which is an international integrated marketing agency. So we're seeing more growth in our international digital marketing area. So we are seeing more and more companies entering the market that are keen to grow and expand in the market. And due to COVID, a lot of the companies that are planning had to put their plans on hold. But we are seeing a return of pre-pandemic level interest in Japan. And so we help companies that are entering or expanding in Japan with marketing, market research, and helping them to fine tune their message for the right target audience. Like I said earlier, content is very important, and often translation doesn't do the job. You need to transcreate and understand the nuance of the end consumer and business person that you're doing business with to be able to communicate with them effectively and then provide your service or product to them.
Yeah, definitely. Transcreation is so important. And I was lucky enough to have another guest on the podcast go much more in depth on that. So I can definitely see how that's such an important niche to be addressed. So just going back to your personal experiences, does anything come to mind that may have been a communication breakdown due to differences in culture, either in your personal life or professional life in Japan?
When I first started working with Japanese businesses, I used to wonder why everything took so long, which can lead to communication breakdown, right? But with time, however, I understood that, I started to appreciate Japanese business culture. Decision making in Japan is very consensus driven, which is building a smoother process for implementation in the long run. That's their objective. And because everyone is aware of the decision, most people agree with it, and careful planning has taken place, the implementation, is smoother. Projects get on track, right? Another benefit of that is, when different groups or companies are involved, you know, this relatively longer process will be stronger, and you start to build trust with the other party, and really helps with implementation through the process, right? But in Western cultures, decision making often comes from the top, and then consensus is built around it, and then an implementation plan is put together, and then we get started, and then we figure out things as we go. Unlike in Japan, everything's organized, everything's planned. So when execution happens, it's very process driven, right? So this different styles of working can cause communication breakdowns. So it's important to be patient, to understand, where the communication is, and understand and adapt to Japanese business culture. And once you've done that, then you feel, oh, this is why it's done this way, and it makes your job a lot easier. And then you actually start to appreciate, how thorough and well documented their processes are, and how everyone's on board, and things happen on time. You get paid on time, so it has all the benefits. So.
So, if you were speaking to somebody who is going to Japan for business and you only had time to teach them one thing about the country or its culture ahead of time, what would you encourage them to learn?
That is a tough question. I would say, well, if you're visiting Japan for business for the first time, and this might look petty, but bring a lot of business cards, preferably in Japanese language as well, because business card exchange is a part of the process. Like very early on, when doing business with Japanese, it formulates the entire relationship, right? And how you receive and give a business card also says a lot about how cultured you are to Japanese business practices, and can it's all about that first impression, and you can make a very good first impression that you can then go on to build your business, right? So bring plenty full of business cards, even if you're doing a business in Japan. That would be my one advice. And if you're a tourist, one thing that I've experienced, I mean, having worked in the hospitality sector, there's no tipping culture in Japan. It can be considered disrespectful. So don't worry about tipping. Just pay the exact amount. If there's change, collect your change, say thank you, arigato gozaimasu, and then leave. And bring a lot of cash as well. Japan is definitely starting to accept more credit cards and digital payments, but then smaller establishments, and especially ones off the beaten track, they still cash is king. So be prepared to bring a lot of cash, because I've been traveling the last year. I'm just amazed by the implementation of digital payments everywhere you go. Everything's credit card or just touch. So less cash, more digital. But here it's more cash.
Yeah, definitely. Two great things to keep in mind when you come here. So, is there anything that we didn't get to talk about or that you wish that we had talked more about in today's conversation, or anything you wish I had asked you?
We covered a lot. No, I think we had a really good conversation. I really enjoyed chatting with you, and shared as much as I could. And I hope it's of benefit to your listeners. I listened to quite a few of your podcasts as well. I really enjoyed your wide variety of content and to help people to succeed in business. And thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing your time.
You're welcome.
I hope that you enjoyed today's conversation. If you'd like to learn more about Robert, Custom Media, Go Connect, or find more information about travel websites, chambers of commerce, and societies, or volunteer groups in Japan, be sure to check out the links in the description of this episode. If you enjoyed today's episode, go ahead and share it with a friend, colleague, or connection on LinkedIn to help spread the perspectives and information shared in the podcast. And please remember to go ahead and subscribe or follow on whatever platform you're using, and also leave a rating and review if you enjoyed the podcast. If you would like to support the podcast, please check out my link to the show's Ko-fi page, Ko-fi, to keep me well caffeinated and making content. As always, feel free to email me at businesssuccessjapan@gmail.com if you have any other questions, comments, or suggestions for future episodes or interview topics. I'd love to hear from you directly, so if you'd like to leave a voice message, you can find the link to do so in the description as well. But for now, remember that the more you learn, the more confident you will become as you explore all of the opportunities Japan has to offer you. Until next time, mata kondo.